Hi everybody. This is Sherry Grunska with Pro Barn Management, and hop on. I'm glad you're joining us tonight for our live Q&A webinar. And I'm clicking on something here that just went off my Facebook page. And tonight we're going to talk about horse barn management, and specifically starting and running a horse boarding stable. And we're going to answer your questions for the next hour and talk about all kinds of good stuff. And if you have any questions, you can text me at 920-205-7518, or you can just put them live down here. And my friend Trish is helping me. Say hi. There's her hand. She's going to help me, and she will give me the questions as we dig in and we start talking about stuff. Thank you for all the great questions this week. I got a lot of them. And we're going to dive right in here. So, remember, and let me know where you're from. I love to know where people are from. I've been getting messages from people all over the country, and that's really cool. So thanks for joining us. So we'll start off. The first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to clarify something that I talked about a couple weeks ago because there was a little bit of confusion. And the subject we were talking about was when you have to correct a horse, a client's horse, a boarder's horse, and specifically using a chain on a horse on their nose, with the halter. And the reason I wanted to clarify it is because I was talking about a person who had come to board at her stable, and she had brought her horses from a different barn, and specifically a youngster. He was only like a year and a half old, very naughty. And the problem was that barn owner would not let anyone use rope halters or chains, and this horse became out of control. And it was really challenging. So I had to teach her and get her to feel comfortable with it, and kind of like guide her through and let her know she's not hurting the horse. You have to do it right. You're not constantly jamming on the horse's nose, but you have to get the horse to respect you. And I had someone message me, and they specifically, what do you do if you have a client that refuses to let you use a chain on their horse and their horse is unruly? And, the whole idea behind using a chain on a horse, like on the halter, it's not something you plan on doing forever. When I use it, it's a very short term. It's to get the horse to mind me, to listen, to know his space, to not run me over, whatever the issue is he does that is unsafe. And my life is more important. my husband's and my employees' lives and all the people at the barn, their lives are more important than the animal. And what to do, and what do you do if you have someone who doesn't want you to use that? And my personal feeling is, if you can't be safe handling a horse and the owner of the horse won't let you use something like a chain when you need to, then it's probably not the right barn, and you probably need to ask them to leave, because under no circumstances do I want to get hurt, and I don't want you to get hurt, or my employees to get hurt, or my husband. And you could run into someone like that. The idea is, when you're using a chain on a horse, I maybe use it a couple weeks and I don't have to use it. I graduate out of it. I graduate the horse out of it. I don't want to have to use it at all. It's a pain. I don't want to have to do it. It's just to get their attention, to make them listen. And so it's not something you do forever, hopefully. And so that's a thought on if you have issues like that. And so I just wanted to run that by you. Also, the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, just because we're going through it right now, and a lot of people ask me, how do you deal with that? And that's the weather. Right now is a really frustrating time here at our barn, as it is every year, and it has to do with the snow melting, and then you have water all over when the temperatures get above 32 degrees. Then you have freezing overnight, and then you have ice. And how do you handle that? And people ask me that all the time. And what do you do? So our situation this last week is we had a lot of snow about a week and a half ago, and then it got really warm. And everything started to melt really fast. And the thing was, the ground was still frozen, so the water had nowhere to go. So it's just sitting there trying to move. And then overnight it freezes again. And normally in the winter, if we have a really long cold spell and it's going to be below 32, then my husband David will take the tractor and the manure spreader, and he'll fill it with hot manure. He'll spread it all over the ice and cover it completely, and then that hot manure freezes on the ice, and it makes the footing beautiful the next day for the horses, and they can go back out on it, and it works great. But when you're going in temperatures below freezing, above freezing, thawing, freezing, the whole thing, you really can't do that. It's hard. So you really have to kind of wait it through. We are really conservative here at our barn. We won't put horses out on the ice at all. So sometimes they're in their stalls for a few days while we're working through it. And sometimes we have to make adjustments. So tomorrow, the horses were in today. Tomorrow, it's going to be below freezing in the morning. David and I will clean stalls, and then if the temps look good around 9:30 or 10, then we should be able to get the horses out for the day. We don't normally do that, but we're willing to make an exception because otherwise you get it in the cycle and the horses are in just for so long. So we're trying to adjust it as we go. It's probably the worst part of the business, the worst part of the job, just adjusting it all. And we don't make it a habit of doing that, but once in a while we're willing to do it if we feel that it's going to be warm enough where we can get them out safely. And we just feel it's time to get the horses back outside. So it's a very frustrating time of year, and if you're dealing with any kind of weather where you have the melting and the freezing and the thawing, sometimes your clients don't understand that, and they could drive by another barn and they see their horses out. And it really depends a lot on the layout of your land. Our paddocks are in a low area on our property, and the water tends to flow through them and into a ditch area, a culvert and a ditch, but the water has to pass through that, and there's nothing you can do on a massive area of land to divert it. I mean, I guess unless you're a multimillionaire and you have the money to reconstruct the whole land area, and we don't have that. So we have to just go right through it, and we do it every year, and the horses do just fine. I think it's more frustrating for the owners of the horses at the time that it's going on. But, you know, all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, you look up and the weather's beautiful, the horses are out, and that short little window where they were in their stalls a little bit more than anyone wants passes. So I just want to talk to you about that in case some of you are dealing with that. It's just part of it. I'm sure in a few weeks we'll be talking about mud, and that's always a real fun thing too. But right now we're kind of dealing with the ice situation here at our stable, and if you are too, let us know. It's just part of it, that of having horses. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll read one of the questions. This was a really, I thought this was kind of a neat question. Very good question for running a business and trying to figure out your board rates. It says, hey there, I will be listening to your barn operations video while I'm feeding this morning, which I thought was kind of cool. Someone's listening to me while they're working. Yay! Woo! But before I do, I have my own question, and it's something that has just come to me over the past week during this Texas winter storm we had. Wow, you guys really had it in Texas. We were praying for you up here in Wisconsin, and I hope you guys are much warmer now. It was a bad time for all you guys down there, especially with animals. We just bought this place over Thanksgiving. It's a small facility, 6 acres, and I'm limiting to 12 horses. I've had 11 of them out here since I moved here. I've had my own lesson training business for the past 13 years, but I've always used someone else's facility, either their homes or their local boarding barns. And it's a dream come true to offer care to my clients. This place that we bought was a self-care facility, which I nipped in the bud from the beginning, so none of the previous boarders stayed. And oh my gosh, that is exactly what I was talking about last week, about buying a place and then changing things. So what she did is she purchased a place that was self-care. You know, it could be that the boarders brought their own hay in. It could be they had to clean their own stalls, a lot of different things. But she's now the owner of the place, and so she changed it to a regular boarding stable where she was doing the work, and so people leave because they don't like the changes. This place, let's see, I received 2 horses for training for December, February to start under saddle. I am actually offering them a free week in March because I was not able to work with their horses this past week due to the winter storm. It's something I feel right about doing, and I don't mind doing it, but here is my question. For boarding, it has occurred to me that when I was coming up with my prices, I took the average that it cost me to care for my own horses a month and tripled the amount. I read this in a book once. I read this in a book once, but I can't remember the name of the book. I'll tell you it wasn't my book because I won't tell you to do that. So I tripled my amount, and I will definitely make money in the easier seasons when the horses will be out on full turnout and eat less hay when they're out on pasture, eat less hay and not need warm mash for extra calories and water in the winter. But for example, these 2 horses, I am actually losing money because they are now supposed to go home during the lighter months. Has it ever been done where people will sign a lease almost like a house rental? So a yearly board agreement at a fixed rate and then a monthly board rate. More than the yearly. If so, is there a common percentage I should consider, or should I continue with my triple amount but base off the winter months cost? I'm extremely blessed with my clients and they treat me well, and I am sure if I went to them now and told them, hey, I spent nearly double on roughage this past month, do you think you could pitch in an extra $50 on March? They probably would. But I know I will not always have clients like that, and I want to be prepared, because if I have 6 boarders at $50, that's a 30% of my profit, which is a huge number. So this is a really great situation to talk about when you're trying to figure out your income, you're setting prices and all that. So what she did is she tripled her prices, and she's going over the 12-month period. She's estimating that some of her months are going to be less than others as far as expenses. You're always going to have more expenses in the winter, always. You're heating water buckets, you're feeding extra hay, she's feeding mash, which sounds like it's included. But the idea of just tripling the amount, to me, is a little scary to do, because you still don't have a real good idea of what all your expenses are. It sounds like it's more like this book that you read was just having you kind of guess and just triple. And what I teach and what I tell people to do is we're going to be very specific on what all your expenses are, and then you figure out what your board rates are going to be. So that way you don't lose money no matter what the situation is. I don't want you guessing at your prices, because that's what I did when we first and hoping the numbers come out right. But then when you run into a situation where you need to ask someone for $50 extra in March because of the expenses, my personal opinion is it just I think makes you look a little less professional, that you don't know what your full expenses are. So what I would do is I would figure out all your expenses, and not from you owning your horses. You may have an idea of how much hay to feed because you feed your own horses, and that would make sense. But your expenses for grain, are you including grain, or is grain extra? It sounds like the mash is included. You need to figure out those prices, and then you divide it out by 12 months. And that way it's covered all year, even though you're only feeding it during the time. You need to figure out your electric bill, and then you divide it out by 12 months. You'll have Your electric bill may triple in the wintertime and then go down way low in the summertime, but you take the yearly amount and you divide it out by 12 months. You have your insurance. Your hay, you may feed less hay in the summer, we do, and we feed a lot more hay in the winter, but you take your total cost and you divide it out by the number of horses for the entire year, and you get a ballpark price, and that way it balances out. It's a much more sound way to do it than to just guess and triple the amount, and then you're still asking people for an extra $50 here when you have to feed more mash. The only time I have heard of a situation, I talked to a woman in the East Coast, and she asked if it was appropriate to do a surcharge on hay because they had a bad summer, and hay had skyrocketed. And I said, if you feel comfortable with it, do it. If you're going to lower the price back down when the prices go down. Our hay went up 2 summers ago a lot because it was a bad summer here in Wisconsin, and the farmers couldn't get the hay off the ground, and hay prices went up. And what I did is I just figured out the price and raised our board, because I had to raise it anyways, and I raised it a little bit more than I normally do in November, and it averaged out perfectly for the entire year, so I didn't lose money. Events are going to come up all the time. Grain cost, our grain just went up. I just got a letter last week that grain was going up. The commodities for the first quarter were going up. And when that goes up, if your grain is included, now that's more money that you're going to be losing. I always charge, grain is extra at our barn, and so I will feed it, and I will even order the grain, certain types of grain, and then I just bill the customer whatever I'm paying, and that way they're paying for it. I don't have to worry about losing money. So it's kind of, I look at it more like that. You have your insurance to think about. If you have employees, you have workman's comp to think about. Your repairs, expenses, and the list goes on and on. Property, taxes is huge. So just tripling something just to triple the price is kind of haphazardly, I guess. It's just kind of taking a shot and hoping you have enough money. But it's not really probably a good business way to do things. I don't know if the bank would say that was a good way to do it. You're just kind of guessing. I would be more systematic and figure out exactly what all your bills are. If you have work equipment, fuel for the year, you're going to use a lot more fuel probably in the winter than in summer. And if you have fuel you have to use, trucks, tractors, repairs, all that gets included in all that. Then you have really good numbers on what it costs to run the place. And so I thought this was a really good question, because this person is trying to figure this out. And you can do it however you want. If you want to triple it, go ahead. But you'll have peace of mind if you have your numbers correct and you know exactly what you're spending. You don't have to just guess then. So I hope that answers that a little bit more. I'm trying to think if I had anything else in there. The other part of it was, do you think it would be okay? I could ask my clients to pitch in an extra $50 on March, and they probably would, but I will not always have clients like that to be prepared to ask extra. That's the thing about a business. You may have clients right now that are willing to pitch in extra money, $50 here or there, but when you're running a business, you have to look at how you present yourself. And I don't know, personally, I just think it takes away from that as a well-run business. I would not ask my clients to pitch in money to help cover the cost. I would already have that figured into the board, even if I have to raise the board and then figure it in for that. You're going to have some months where your profit is a little less because of the expenses going up, especially in winter. And then in summer, your profits are going to be more, and you should be putting money hopefully away for that, so that when you do have that tough month or two, Bedding is a really good example of this. In the summer, we use a lot less bedding in our stalls, a lot less. But in the winter, when the horses are in all the time, I could actually have to get 2 loads of shavings delivered in 1 month. So my price has doubled, but that's not the client's fault that the weather was bad at all. If I'm short on money, that's my fault because I didn't have my finances figured out for these kind of, I guess you'd call them weather emergencies or whatever, weather situations. And the thing is, you're going to have those. You're going to have those weather situations every year. Something's going to come out. So the horses, when they're in more in the winter, I just already know there's going to be a few months where I'm going to have to call for bedding more than I normally do. It could be when we're really muddy in the spring and the horses are in for a few extra days, or if we get a really cold spell and they're in for quite a while there. We're going to go through bedding like crazy. You know, the horses, they just poop all over. There's so much more. We're taking out so much more. And so I want to make sure I have my numbers right. I don't want to have to go to them and say, I'm short money. Can you add $50 on the price? I just think it looks unprofessional. And that's kind of my thought about it. So if you disagree with me, if you have any other thoughts, just let me know. That's kind of how I look at that. But that's a great question on trying to set up your business, especially if you just started in Thanksgiving and you're just kind of going into it. Expect the first year to be like this. A lot of 2 steps forward, a step back, figuring out your prices. Don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself a couple of years to let it all even out. And then you're going to have a really good look at what winters look like, summers look like, springs, you know, what the seasons look like and the cost and the expenses. And then it should get a lot easier. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And let me know if you think anything differently. Do you have questions, Trish?
We have, several different topics.
Uh-huh.
First couple from Amy.
Okay.
The first one from her says, do you quarantine horses new to the facility? If so, for how long? It's a hot topic one. People ask this all the time.
So, what I'm going to answer, there'll be people out there that don't agree with me, and there'll be people that do agree with me. So I'm not going to please everybody, and that's, you know, that's okay. I do not quarantine horses that come here to our barn. When they come here, they have to have all their shots and everything current. And I look at it like this. I have horses that travel all the time. They go out of state, they go to shows, they go trail riding. And because of that, you know, it's the same thing. They're out among other horses, especially at shows where they're in, you know, they could be in a barn with 20 other horses. So I make sure that when they come here, they have everything they need that I recommend, that I require for our stable. And that is all recommended by the vets in our area. So I do not quarantine. I will separate a horse for a couple days out in a paddock, maybe to get to know their personality and to get them to settle in before I put them in a herd, but I don't quarantine. And I think we've had that question a lot.
Yeah.
And I always say your jaw's going to drop when you say that, because some people are going to be like, oh my God, you don't quarantine. That's so irresponsible. But we've done it 15 years. I've not had a problem with it, you know, because the horses coming into my barn are not sick. And you know what? I could have a horse go to a show and come back with something, you know, just as easy at a show. So I don't, and I'm okay with that because I try to keep everything, you know. Is there a 100% guarantee that a horse isn't going to bring something back from a show or anywhere else? No, there's not. And is there a guarantee a horse from coming into your place isn't going to bring something? No, there's not. But that's how I do it, and I feel really comfortable with it in that situation. So I hope that answers that.
Okay, her next question says, how do you deal with the boarding fee when a client has to take their horse to a training facility for 30 to 90 days? Do you charge them to secure their spot while they're gone? And her note is that they are a self-care facility, and I just lost it, and they only provide this facility.
Oh, okay. So what we do here is, and we've had this happen over the years. We had we actually had one person here who had, we're not a reining barn. We don't have reining horses here. We don't have really good footing for reining horses. But we had one guy that was living in the area, and he had bought this nice little reiner, and he wanted to board at our stable. He liked our facility, but I had told him, I said, well, we don't really have reiners here, and our footing really isn't the best for it. He goes, well, the horse is only going to be here part of the time. It'll be down in Iowa for training. And so I said to him, I said, well, will you be moving the horse there? Or no, he goes, no, the horse will be coming back. So he paid for the stall, even when he paid full price for the stall, even when the horse was gone. And then he'd bring the horse back, and then the horse would go again, and then he'd go show and be gone for 2 months. He paid for the stall. I've always had it set up where if your horse leaves for training somewhere else, you still have to pay for the full price for the stall. There's no discounts at all. So some of you are probably like going, what? I look at it like that stall is like an apartment you rent. If you leave and you go to Africa for 6 months on a journey, you still have to pay your apartment rent. And that's how I look at the stall. With the feed and everything, they pay the full price. I just do it that way. I've always done it that way, and it's worked really well. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about something to add on to this, because this was a question I had, and this was about subleasing a stall. And because people will ask, like, if a horse goes, let's say up here, a lot of times we'll have horses that will travel down south. In this area, they'll go maybe to Florida for training. You'll see that a lot in different barns, where the horses go to warmer states for training, and then they come back up here in the warmer months. And what about that stall? Because you don't want to lose the money. So a lot of times a barn owner, if it works out, will sublease the stall out, and sublease the stall during that period that the horse is gone. Now, that is great, and I hope it always works out. Unfortunately, for me, it did not work out. I tried to sublease a stall. I had someone that was taking their horse down to Florida, and they were going to be down there for 4 months. And during the 4 months, which was the heart of winter here, they said they knew someone that wanted to come to our barn that wanted an indoor arena. So we have a large indoor arena. So this person was going to sublease the stall, and they wanted to come here for the winter. And I was okay with it. I thought, that'll work out okay. I knew it was going to be a little bit more work for me, because now I have this new horse coming in, and I have to get them acclimated to a herd and other things. But I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And this was kind of when we first opened. So what happened was they took this horse down to Florida, and the new horse came here, and the new people came with the horse, and they were using our place, and they were here about, they must have been here about 2 or 3 weeks, and everything was great. Well, the people that had taken their horse down to Florida, it wasn't working out down there, and they wanted to bring their horse home. Well, what happened was they wanted to bring their horse home, but the person who was in the barn didn't want to leave. So it became kind of a really awkward situation, because it caused stress between the person who was subleasing that didn't want to leave, because now they're in a routine and they're in a training program with their horse here, and the people down in Florida want to get their horse back here, and I don't have any stalls open. And what those two people had to do was work it out, because I really didn't care at that point. I just didn't want to deal with the drama, and I said, okay, you guys have to work it out. And I think they agreed for an extra month, and they stayed for an extra month, and then they left early, and the other horse came back. I guess now, if I was to do it again, I would know ahead of time to make sure that there's some arrangement in paper about this, that if a horse comes back early, for some reason the horse is lame, something happens and it needs to come back early, because I don't want to deal with the drama between the two people, because the one person's mad because they have to move their horse again and the other person wants to come back from where they're at. So that's subleasing. That's the situation I had, but some people sublease and it works out great. But people here, I don't really like to sublease anymore if I don't have to, just because it's more work for me. It disrupts the herds, and I don't want to have to do that. But I have had people, take their horse to different training barns for a month or two, and they pay full price here. And I'm okay with that. I feel comfortable with it. Some people might give a discount for the hay not being used or the bedding, but I haven't done that at all. They just charge the flat boarding rate of what we charge, and it works out well. So I hope that answers the question. Okay.
Okay. I am planning to run a small, oh wait, is that the one I wanted? I think it is. I am planning to run a small overnight boarding facility. Horse hotel.
Mm-hmm.
How would you approach pricing in this case?
Well, pricing would be the same way. You have to figure out your expenses. You're really going to have to figure out your expenses and then divide it out over, the month, and say, okay, so if you have someone coming for 5 days, okay, what would that cost you in a month's period, and kind of divide it out. Of course, there's a little bit of modifications there depending. We've had people stay overnight at our barn traveling. When they're traveling from one place to another, they'll call me up and they'll say, do you have a place that my horse can stay, for 2 nights? We're traveling out west, or they're coming here for something. And in the summer, I can do it a little bit easier because I can put the horses outside. And I'm willing to do that, and for a here or there. But if you're going to do it as a business, then I would do it the same way. I would gather all your expenses and divide it out, and then divide it out in a month's time. If that horse was going to be at your place for a month, divide out those numbers and find out what it would cost, and then you just say, okay, the horse is here for 2 nights. That's what it would cost. So if your board is $500 a month, you divide it out, divided by 30, which I don't know at the top of my head what it is. Oh, Trisha's going to figure it out. And it comes out $17 a night, but that's not including hay or anything else. You have to figure all that out. Are you going to offer hay?
1666.
1666. I was close. You have to figure out, are you going to include hay? Is there any labor involved in that? All that kind of stuff. And you have to figure out your expenses. And the only way I think to do it is, okay, if that person was going to stay a month, what would that cost for a monthly rate? And then you divide it out. And you have to remember you have extra charges in there, because when you have people coming and going overnight stay, there's a little bit extra work. There might be the thing of them showing up at 2 in the morning. If they're traveling, you are going to be using a little bit. You're going to have time invested in, talking to them, getting them acclimated, depending on how long they're staying. I think it's a great thing. It's needed. It's a wonderful idea, and I love it. I love the idea of it. But figure out all your expenses, and that means if you have your accountant, your property taxes, all that. And I'm going to do this right now because I do it every time. If you're trying to figure out what your expenses are and what that looks like, if you're going to do any kind of boarding, please check out my book, A Step-by-Step Guide to Starting and Running a Successful Horse Boarding Business. We talk about all this in here. It's really going to get you to look at what your expenses are, whether you're doing overnight boarding, whether you're doing, boarding for days here and there or months. You got to figure out all those expenses so you're not losing money in any of it, because it all costs money. even cutting the grass. If you have a business, you have to take care of the lawn. You have maintenance. You have to take care of all that stuff. That all needs to be added in there, and I talk about that in that book. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on my website, probarnmanagement.com. Go in there and check it out, because it's going to really help you look at all those costs, because it's a great job, but it's very stressful when you're losing money. And so I guess I just really want to put that out there and just figure out what your expenses are. Even your accounting, your paperwork, all your paperwork, that all costs money. The ink for your printer, if you're going to run a business, that all is part of it. It has to be paid somehow. So definitely, those are really important things to look at. Okay.
Okay. If there is a huge difference between your current board and after you figure out the expenses for the 12 months, how would you handle this with your boarders?
Okay. Tell me what kind of difference you're talking. Are you talking like $50? Are you a brand new? Did you just buy a place and now you need to change it? Either way, you're going to have people that are not happy. So I have talked to a couple barn owners through the last couple years who realized that their prices were too low. They were losing money, and they needed to raise them like $50 to get to where they weren't losing money. I am a big believer in just being honest and just spitting it out. I'd write a letter. I'd give them a 2-month notice. I'd give all your boarders a 2-month notice to give them time to process the changes. And you have to understand that you might have people leave, and be okay with that, and just say, okay, we're starting fresh here on how we're running our business because we're losing money. We lost money at the beginning because my board rates were too low. And I actually did the stupid thing. I had a price, and then I lowered them even more because I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to get boarders, and I was nervous about my ability and everything. And then I had to pay catch up for years because I didn't feel comfortable raising my board, $100. I just didn't feel comfortable. So it was tough. But I have talked to barns that have raised their board $50, and I think the best thing you can do is be really upfront with your clients and say, I have to do this. I always tell people it doesn't do anyone any good for you to go out of business. As a business, if you close your doors, there's a lot of people that now have no place to move their horse, and you can't run a business like that where you're losing money. And they need to understand that. Will everyone understand? Of course not. And you'll have people that will probably get upset, and they'll probably leave. But you will have new people come, and they'll understand, and they'll appreciate all the work you do. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and be really honest about what's going on. And that's how I would do it. And be okay with it. You have to do what's best for you. You can't run a business and lose money. The bank, if you have a mortgage, a business mortgage, the bank is not going to be sympathetic when they say to you, well, why didn't you raise your board? And you say, well, I know all these people and I like them and I didn't want them to be mad at me. That's not good business. The bank, every year, in fact, we're refinancing our business loan right now. I'm waiting for the paperwork to come through to just sign it. And every year I talk to the loan officers, and and every year they ask me the same thing. Are you full? Do you have clients? Do you have a waiting list? Did you raise your board this year? They ask me that every year. Every year they ask me. And once in a while there are some years. This year I did not raise our board because we felt really comfortable with our prices. And hay this last summer stayed. Hay usually is the hay and fuel, but hay really is the price setter of where the board's going to be. It's your most expensive cost next to your mortgage. And so I they'll ask me that every year. Did you raise your board? And this year I said no, and I feel good with it. And they were okay with that. So you are answering to a bank, and they are not going to be sympathetic if you say, well, I couldn't raise my board because they just can't afford it, or they're such nice people. They might be really nice people, but you still have a business to run, and the bank wants to make sure that their loan is secure. So it's when you're running a business, you have other people that are monitoring how the business is working. And at first it may seem a little overwhelming, but you get used to it, you get into the groove, and it helps you grow as a business person too, and also to take yourself seriously. And your clients need to know that. So it all kind of pieces together.
And you might have answered that in this question, but how often are you increasing your board?
Oh, okay. So I didn't increase it this year. The year before I increased it by $25 because our hay really went up. Usually it's every other year. I have done it 2 years in a row. But for me, I'm monitoring all my expenses. So because I raised it $25 per horse last year, I did not raise it this year. And I felt really comfortable with that. It depends on all my expenses because things go up. Everything will go up a little bit. And I have a window in there where I can kind of gauge, and I'm willing to go like that. But this year I did not raise it. But I could have raised it $10, and I think everyone would have been perfectly fine with it, but I was okay with not.
Okay. What are actions that you can take to lower your liability insurance costs?
That's okay. Your liability insurance whoever is carrying you, like we go through Heartland, Excalibur in Heartland, Wisconsin, and they do only equine businesses. They will tell you things that are going to raise your rates and keep your rates at a base. So you would need to talk to them. For example, if they will come out to your barn and look at your place, there are things you have to have in place: fire extinguishers, exit signs. They will ask you what kind of dogs you have on the property, stallions, different things. So you have to talk to your insurance agent on that, and see what they have. Some insurance carriers, our hay is separate from where the horses are. It's in the same building, so if the weather's bad, we don't have to go outside, but we actually have a door that can separate it and a wall. The insurance carrier I went through, if I remember right, when they first came to our barn, I believe if your hay is above your stalls in an open area, I think that time he was saying there might be, you'd pay a little bit more of a, there might be some kind of liability risk there, and that could fluctuate the hay, the price, because the hay is over the horses right above. And I'm not talking about a dairy barn, but I'm talking, where the hay is above like that. But I'm talking about a lot of places the hay is like right open over the horses. But you'd have to really ask your insurance carrier. I can't answer that, and find out what they want, and they may give you suggestions on things you can do to lower your price. So sorry about that. I can't answer that one. I just realized we're at an hour already.
No, we're not.
We're not?
7:14.
Oh, what's this?
I don't know.
We're looking at 2 different times. Okay, we're going to go for a little bit more then.
It is interesting, though.
Because it says live an hour and 8 minutes, but we got about 15 more minutes, so we'll cook. So I don't know what that is. I have no idea.
I'm so confused.
Because it says we've been on for an hour and 8 minutes, but I guess we've only been on 45. So we'll continue to go if that's okay with you guys. I have no idea.
I don't know either.
Okay, do you have another question?
I do.
Okay.
I have a small farm,
Uh-huh.
6 horses, and only one pasture that they share. The horses all get along, but one plays too rough and leaves small bite wounds on all the others. Have you ever used a muzzle in this type of situation? The horse is owned by a close friend that I don't want to kick out.
Okay, I would not use a muzzle on a horse for that kind of situation ever, personally. I think in this situation, so let me backtrack here. I think if you're going to board horses, are they all boarded horses or are they hers?
I think she boards them.
Okay, so the thing is, when you're going to board horses, you really don't know their core personality until they get there and they're in a herd. And you're going to have your players, horses that play, usually they're geldings. You're going to have the ones that are crabbier, the dominant, and ones that aren't. And you don't always know exactly the full extent of their personality until they're in a herd setting and they blossom, and then you get to really see what you got. I would not kick the person out if if I could help it. I would personally make 2 paddocks so that you could try to separate that horse maybe with one other horse. I'm assuming, I don't know if these are all geldings or if they're mares in there. Usually mares won't let a gelding do that to them. It's usually the geldings that are playing. So if you answer, let me know if that comes in or not. But I personally, if you're going to board horses, even 6 horses, give yourself some flexibility.
Boarded.
Huh?
They're boarded.
No, I mean, okay.
That's the first answer
Yeah.
I got. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, that's good. But I was thinking if they are if they're all geldings or whatever, it sounds like geldings to me, kind of. Or at least one gelding that's doing that, I should say. And they're playing all the time. Give yourself some flexibility. If you can create 2 paddocks instead of having the one, then when you have players like that, sometimes you can separate them.
Separating will not be possible with her setup, and they are geldings.
Okay. In that case, you are kind of limited. If you cannot separate them at all, then you have to decide, because if you're having other people complain because horses are getting nicked up or not, then you're going to create more stress for yourself, and you're going to have to decide if you have to ask this horse to leave. You're kind of, unfortunately, if you can't split the paddock, you're limiting yourself on the flexibility you have with these horses, because even if you ask this person to leave, you could have another horse come in and they could be the same situation if you're accepting just geldings, for instance. We have mostly geldings in our barn. Actually, almost all geldings, very few mares, and most of the geldings, a lot of them are players, and they nick each other up, they do this or that. But my boarders understand that these are some of the things when you board here and they have geldings, they understand that this is part of it. And I'm not talking about aggressive horses, I'm talking about just horses that play. Like they'll play face tag and they'll scratch their face up, and all of a sudden you'll come in, you'll see a little scratch mark on a horse because they've taken their teeth and they're playing face tag, or they'll bite each other in the butt as they're playing. Unless you're going to do individual runs for each of these horses or you're going to split them up, you probably should have a talk with your clients and let them know this is how it is and make sure they're okay with it. If you ask that one person to leave because their horse is the one doing it all, you can do that, but there's no guarantee about the next horse coming in. And there's always going to be something with horses. Always. There's always something that happens. So unfortunately, I don't have a better answer for you. I feel like you're probably pretty limited if you can't split the paddock up. So that's kind of, I guess I would just probably try and think of other options at that point. Okay.
One more.
Okay.
This is from Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Hi Sherry, I hope you have time for the question I sent you earlier today about a boarder who was half leasing."
Yes. Okay. Hi Patricia, how are you? Thank you. Yeah, I got it right here. I printed it out. So I'm going to read this one. And I'm going to read it just so I kind of get it right. Hi Sherry, happy Monday, and I hope you are well. I have a sticky situation and wonder if you might be interested enough to find it interesting enough to cover during one of your Q&A sessions. So I have a boarder. I'm not going to mention any names. I have a boarder here who was half leasing his horse to a young girl. So he's half leasing his horse to a young girl. The young girl was also taking some lessons from a trainer, a mobile trainer that was coming there. The trainer left with hardly any notice and moved away. So the trainer's not there anymore. The girl was invited by another boarder to ride her horses for free, and this person had enough riding experience to even offer her some informal training. The girl otherwise makes no payments to this person or to the stables. Even though he says he loves it here, this other person who was leasing his horse is upset because he relied on the girl to give his horses exercise and attention. But he says he found another half-leased person at another stable. So I'm new at this and didn't believe I should be involved in a boarder's personal business dealings, but should I? How would you deal with this? I'm certain it's too late for me to keep this person here, but he's going to move his horse because he has someone that will half lease the horse there. Thank you so much. It's a drag, but I think it happens once in a while. I don't get involved with leasing situations at my barn. I mean, we have a few horses that are leased, half leased, full leased at our stable. And, the root of it all is, the truth is, there's never any guarantees of anything. I mean, trainers come and they go. People leave with trainers. They come with trainers. People lease horses and they decide they're done leasing that horse and they find another horse they want to lease more. It's all part of the dynamics of boarding horses. Personally, I don't get involved. I don't get involved. I don't get involved. I don't get involved with leasing situations unless it becomes drama. I don't make any money off leasing situations because I'm still getting my board money, and if that person leasing helps pay for some of that, that's fine. For that boarder, if they're helping to pay, that's up to them. As long as I get my board money, I'm okay with that. There's not much you can do in that situation. I would not move a horse myself. I guess the way I personally look at it, because I used to board my horses years ago, if someone stopped leasing my horse, but I knew that my horse was at a stable that had really excellent care and my horse was happy and thriving, I would not move them to another stable just because someone was going to half lease them. I think that's kind of nuts myself. I wouldn't do that. I would say they have to come to my barn where my horse is at. And because the most important thing is the care of the horse. And all that other stuff really doesn't matter if your horse isn't doing well and is not. And if your horse is stressed or unhappy, then there's all kinds of other problems that it can happen and evolve. So you can talk to them and try to get them to stay, but there's no guarantee. If someone's going to leave because of that, I personally would never leave or move my horse because of that, because someone wanted to lease my horse somewhere else. But I have heard of that happening before, and I don't get involved in it. It's kind of a bummer situation, especially if the boarder is a great boarder. The sad part is they might not be looking at the full picture of what it's going to do to the horse. It can be stressful on the horse, especially if the care is not optimal. So it's just something to think about. I think also you had texted me also another part of that question about having someone exercise your horse, you paying them to exercise it versus them leasing it from you. And ultimately, you're right, the most important thing is the care of the horse. I've seen it done both ways, where people will pay someone to exercise their horse when they're gone or they can't come out because of different situations. Maybe someone's had a baby, they'll pay someone to exercise their horse. And I've also seen it the other way, where people will lease the horse and pay the boarder. You can do it either or, and I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. It just depends on the relationship between the person that owns the horse and the person that wants to do something with the horse. You can do it either way. I've had people lease my horses, young people lease my horses years ago for showing. But also I have paid people to ride our horses if I had a horse that needed to be worked while we were gone. So I've seen it both ways. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong. I think they both work, and it just depends. But it's a bummer when someone's going to leave. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. I personally wouldn't get involved myself, but I would never move my horse just to half lease it somewhere else. I would, especially if my horse was happy and doing well. It's just more stress on the animal. So that's a bummer. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's kind of how I look at it.
And you had one other lady, Jennifer, sent an email earlier today regarding terminating a lease. Did you get that one?
I did not get that one. Does it?
That's all I have.
Terminating a lease.
So I don't know any specifics.
Okay. If you can you type it real quick here? And I have one question here I'm going to answer. Well, I don't know if you want to know about terminating a lease or how you want to do that, but I'll tell you a situation that happened a long time ago, and this had to do with someone leasing a horse, and this was kind of a bummer situation. And so the way I look at it as the barn owner is I kind of trump it all. I don't mean to sound like that in a bragging way or anything, but if someone leasing a horse at our barn cannot follow the rules or is doing something that is not right, I have the power to say that person can't come to my barn anymore, even if it means now the boarder does no longer has a leaser. Does that make sense? So if you're leasing a horse and the person you're leasing the horse to cannot, has drama issues, can't follow rules, whatever, and just is making things worse, and I get to a point where I've had enough, I can say as the barn owner, I can go to the person who owns the horse and say, this isn't working out. We've done everything we can. They continue to do this. And, after talking to the barn owner, I will say, what, they can't be on the property anymore. They cannot lease a horse here. And I had that happen, about 8 years ago, and it was a bummer because I had to, it was a person who was younger, and I had to call the parent and say they can't lease the horse at our stable anymore because of something serious that had happened. And I had to say they couldn't come to our property anymore. They couldn't be on the property. And that meant that the person who owned the horse all of a sudden didn't have a leaser. They didn't have that money to help pay their board. And they may have, I could have lost them as a boarder because they could have easily said, well, I can't afford it here. But they stayed, and they ended up looking around, and they ended up finding someone else to lease their horse. But I had to do that one time, and it was a drag. I felt bad. It was a bad situation. And but ultimately, that's the thing, as the barn owner, you get to call the shots, and sometimes you have to make those hard calls. But I had to do it. I had to do it for everybody, and it was a better situation to do it. It was just a drag when it happened. But that's, as a business owner, you get to do that. You are the one that makes the ultimate decision and the final decision on how that works. Did you have anything back on that? Okay. Terminating a lease, I don't know what the full question was, but that's what I just said. You have the right to terminate a lease. As the barn owner, you have the right to terminate a lease. You can say it. The horse owner may not like it. They may leave, But if your reasons are valid for terminating the lease, then usually the horse owner will also understand, the person that owns the animal will also understand. So make sure you talk to them first. Don't just terminate the lease until you make sure you have talked to the person who owns the horse. Make sure everybody's on the same page. So I guess that's how I look at it, and that's how I run my barn. And it, you just kind of, hopefully it just doesn't happen too often, because it's a bummer when it does. I'm going to ask I have one more question I'm going to answer, and then I think we can do an end. It's, wow, fast hour. So this person is an employee at a stable, and I'm kind of skipping through it because I want to keep this person anonymous. But they work there 5 days a morning, 5 days a mornings, 5 mornings a week, to feed 5 horses, hay, grain, scrub, fill water buckets inside stalls, turn them out into their paddocks. They provide hay and water. They do all the cleaning up, blanketing, and that is their job description. And it says, in my contract I signed, it lists these job duties, but it doesn't list that I'm responsible for shoveling snow and chopping ice. The person I work for, the barn I work for, normally has someone come and do all that in front of all the paddocks. And the person they had, I guess, apparently can't come, and the ice isn't getting taken care of. This person has fallen a few times. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little because I don't want to give too much away on where this person is. But they feel like it's a very dangerous situation, and they were not hired to shovel snow, and she doesn't want to shovel snow and take care of the ice. And she feels like she's not being taken seriously, and she feels disrespected by the owner. And how do you deal with that? I think this is a really good topic to get really into and talk a full hour about, because a lot of times the reason barns have problems is because, like any business, you have the manager, you have the barn owner, and then you have the employees. And if there is not a good understanding of everyone's job description and a respect for all that, people get upset. If it's a safety issue, I would address it right away, especially with ice. The bummer part about all of it is, if you are working for a barn owner who does not care that there's an ice issue, who does not care that it's a safety issue, then all I can tell you is, if they're not going to change, then personally I would look for a new place to work. Shame on them for letting that happen and dealing with that. I guess I just, I would not ask someone to do that working for us. I would, that's not in their job. Unless they knew going into the job it was part of their job description. But to take care of ice and all that, unless you have the right equipment to do it, it's a lot of work. And it's very physical work, and that's on top of everything else you got to do. But if you're working for someone who doesn't care that the horses are walking across ice and you have fallen and it's very dangerous and they don't want to do anything, then maybe it's kind of a red flag for you to look for another place to work. You can't change someone if the barn owner isn't going to change, no matter how much you talk to them. You can't force them to change, and that means it's probably time to look. It's no different than someone working at a restaurant. You could work at a restaurant and have the nicest manager to work for. So easy, understanding, da-da-da-da-da. Won't ask you to do anything he would never do. You know what I mean? And then you could work at a different restaurant and have kind of a crappy manager who asks you to do all the yuck jobs and, makes you feel kind of bad about yourself and all that. It's all about leadership and treating people with respect and being organized and I wish I could give you a better answer on that, but if that's how you feel working there, then it might be time to look for another place to work, especially if it becomes a real hazard. And that's how I look at it. People are people, and some people just, they run barns differently, and you have to find a barn where you feel like you're totally respected, and it's going to be a safe situation no matter what. So I wish there was a better answer for you, but yeah, we deal with ice all the time, but I won't have my employees working on ice, and I know how dangerous it could be because I have fallen a few times. So sorry about that, but it's a great question to think, really to think about. Anyways, our hour flew by. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can check out these webinars anytime, listen to them anytime on Facebook on probarmanagement.com. And you can go to our website at ProBarn Management. I'll have them on YouTube. And we'll be back next Monday. And if you have any questions between now and then, send them to me and I will answer them next week. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody. There were so many to talk about. And they were all really good questions, and you guys are awesome. Thank you. God bless you, and wish you the very best. And I keep praying, hopefully the weather gets warmer and just keeps getting warmer and the ice disappears. Anyways, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you. Bye.